asked for.
This package represents an aggressive investment in American families, American workers, and America's national defense.
Midterm elections made 2022 a high-stakes year for politics.
I'm not pro-Trump. I'm not anti-Trump. I'm like most of America. We're just moving on.
The January 6th committee recommends criminal charges against former President Donald Trump.
We've never had a president of the United States stir up a violent attempt to block the transfer of power.
Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with some breaking news. There are serious efforts to bring Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to the U.S. Capitol tomorrow. Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, the co-chair of the Congressional Ukraine Caucus, says there are ongoing serious efforts being made behind the scenes to bring Zelenskyy to the Capitol on Wednesday to address Congress. However, she said, and I just got off the phone with her, there is no official confirmation Zelenskyy will be able to make it. A lot of logistic and security issues that are up in the air. It's all dependent on that. This would be, if he makes it, Zelenskyy's first time in Washington since Russia first invaded Ukraine 300 days ago. And there was a bit of a tease of what could be happening this week in a letter. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, she asked lawmakers to journey to Washington, get back to the Capitol for a, quote, very special focus on democracy. That raised a lot of discussion, a lot of questions on Capitol Hill. Our colleague, CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now. Scott, good to be with you here this afternoon, early this evening on Red and Blue. What are you hearing at the Capitol? I see some reporting across the wire about Capitol Police preparations for this possible visit.
Yeah, Capitol Police source tells me preparations are underway in case the Zelenskyy visit comes to pass tomorrow. Tomorrow is not just a trivial day here in Congress. They are trying to pass this $1.7 trillion spending plan, which includes billions of dollars in relief and assistance for Ukraine. A pretty pivotal moment for funding to go out to Ukraine, because when House Republicans take the majority in January, there have been questions about whether they'll continue robust funding of the Ukraine war effort through U.S. tax dollars and foreign aid. So it is a tipping point moment. Wouldn't be surprising to see a Ukrainian leader come here to try to put it over the top. But also, the House Speaker calling back members to be here in person is quite a statement. You'll recall, since COVID began and the pandemic began ravaging the Capitol, they've had proxy voting. Members needn't arrive or appear in person, and the House Speaker, Bob, wants them here in person tomorrow.
What a moment this is going to be if Zelenskyy ends up making it after battling Russia throughout much of this year. He was just named Time Man of the Year, Person of the Year, excuse me, for his efforts as the leader of Ukraine to try to preserve his country's safety and security against Russia. I think back to a moment in Speaker Pelosi's life and her story when Winston Churchill came to address the House of Representatives. Guess who was in Congress, Scott? Her father. Congressman Pelosi was in the audience back then when Churchill came. Now she will be in the audience if Zelenskyy gets there tomorrow. Talk about this Zelenskyy visit in the context of Speaker Pelosi leaving the leadership, leaving the speakership, but someone who has focused on issues like democracy and foreign policy throughout her career.
You know what jumps out at me, Bob, is Zelenskyy's prior visit here earlier this calendar year at a distinctively, profoundly politically toxic moment, early 2022. And when Mr. Zelenskyy spoke at the Capitol Visitor Center behind me, he got a bipartisan standing ovation, almost a bridging of gaps that seemed intractable in the U.S. Congress. There'd be a lot of fanfare behind this visit, but it's worth underscoring the fragility of a visit, and nothing's guaranteed considering the unique and distinctive security needs of moving Mr. Zelenskyy.
And what is it like on Capitol Hill, Scott, in terms of funding for Ukraine? When I was speaking with Congresswoman Kaptur just a few minutes ago, who's co-chair of the Congressional Ukraine Caucus, she said, and it was interesting, she added this without prompting, she said, hey, this matters not only because of the symbolism of having Zelenskyy potentially appear, but funding's on the line for Ukraine from the United States Congress to the Ukrainians in the coming months. Is there a real appetite among House Republicans who are soon to take power to keep funding this war in Ukraine, at least in terms of supplies and other things, at the current level, or do you expect it to be dropped down once they take power?
Now, what's striking is that's an open-ended question right now, Bob. The Republicans in the U.S. House Conference have given some indication they want to revisit the level of aid. And we also know House Republicans are whipping against this spending plan, this $1.7 trillion plan, which includes the foreign aid to Ukraine. So Republicans in the U.S. House haven't really been at the negotiating table, it seems, in a big way in crafting this bill. But I did spend quite a bit of time this afternoon listening to 5 Republican senators at a press conference on a stem winder of criticism against this bill. They did not mention the Ukraine aid as one of their points of contention. It seems like this is on a trajectory to passage sooner than later, as early as tomorrow. And the Ukraine aid has not been a red flag or a point of contention.
Scott, I was just looking at some of the past foreign leaders who have spoken to a joint session of Congress. And I believe, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, that Congress needs to pass legislation if they're going to have a leader formally address them. Is that right?
You'll have to do that procedurally probably tomorrow morning at the latest or tomorrow afternoon at the latest. There is a process to go through to have a joint session and to welcome and allow into the House chamber a joint session for a speech by a dignitary or a foreign leader.
And for Zelenskyy, he had addressed Congress earlier this year, but it was virtually, as you've detailed. It was remote. To me, this might be the biggest meeting, the biggest joint session of Congress since perhaps, maybe I'm looking here at the list, Pope Francis, September 24th, 2015. You had the Prime Minister of India a year later. Then you had Emmanuel Macron in April of 2018. But this is a pretty momentous occasion if it actually happens. Let's also talk, Scott, for a second here about the January 6th committee. You've been doing terrific reporting on that. It will release its final report tomorrow, though. Who knows, with the Zelenskyy visit on the horizon. What can we expect from this report tomorrow after all of these hearings?
Hundreds, if not thousands of pages, and at least the beginning wave of transcripts of their key interviews with their key witnesses. The executive summary of this report went about 160 pages, giving you an indication of the breadth and scope of what's likely to come tomorrow. We expect there to be more evidence and more details not presented at the committee's hearings, but the executive summary they released Monday after referring Donald Trump for criminal charges, making a recommendation to the Justice Department, included an awful lot of things we had heard at prior hearings. It was more of a written word version of those first 11 public hearings and meetings of the committee. It's possible some of what we get tomorrow, if not a lot of what we get tomorrow, is redundant in a way to the hearings, but we expect new details, new nuggets. There's going to be a lot to sift through, and we'll have the day tomorrow to get started.
Is there any transcript in particular you want to read?
Yeah, 3 of them. Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner, and Rudy Giuliani. Those were transcripts that the committee has promised it's going to release. It told CBS News it's on the list. And those were 3 witnesses, when featured at the hearings, had excerpts and clips of their interviews that seemed to be either confrontational or competitive with the committee's message and the committee's questions. Would really want to hear what the back and forth was and see it in its entirety.
And one more thing here, Scott. There's another issue that's been bubbling up on Capitol Hill. Congressman-elect George Santos, a Republican from New York's 3rd Congressional District. There's a New York Times story out that he allegedly made up parts of his biography, where he works, where he has worked, where he resides. What are you hearing about the Congressman-elect and whether all of this is going to affect his career in Congress?
When I spoke to Congressman-elect Santos just after the election, he told me he was going to run to become the freshman class leader here in Congress. He wanted to be a leader among the new members of Congress. And he also really leaned into his biography when describing himself. When I asked him for his policy positions or the committees he wanted to be on, he went back to talking about his biography. His biography is what is being questioned in the new reporting. So the political viability of a Santos congressional term is very much in question. How much muscle he'll be able to exert, how much he'll be able to do for his district as a political force in the U.S. House with these questions as a cloud above him.
Scott McFarland, a man who has a lot of reading this week, a lot of transcripts. Good luck with that, Scott, and thanks for being with us this evening. Thank you.
I'm having some bad college flashbacks, but thanks, Bob.
Yeah, we'll all need some coffee. We can read together, Scott. Meanwhile, there are a number of prominent Republican governors that are thinking about running for president in 2024. And earlier today, I spoke to one of them, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu. You might not know about him, but we'll learn more about when he could make a decision. We'll hear that next. But for now, you're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
an original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became a sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future?
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
Vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
When weather turns extreme.
States from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
Every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
Oh! You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
CBS Mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it!
Let's go!
CBS Mornings, starting at 7. Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa. So the midterms are officially done, but political watchers are already looking ahead to the 2024 presidential election. Earlier today, I spoke with Republican New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu. You might know a little bit about him, might not, but he's someone who is thinking about throwing their own hat into the ring. Governor, really appreciate you taking a few minutes to have a chat with us about politics. Thanks for being here.
You bet. Thank you.
So I've known and covered your father, John H. Sununu, the former governor, for a long time, a very candid man. He can be blunt with his opinions. And I know you have a reputation for following in your father's footsteps in that way, being pretty blunt. So what's your blunt assessment about what happened to your party in the midterms?
Well, look, we thought it was going to be the red wave. We got the red ripple, I think, as a lot of folks are calling it. It was a win for Republicans, without a doubt, but not what we were hoping. And it wasn't that we miscalculated on the issues. The issues were real. Inflation is still the issue of the day, but people, I think, underestimated the American people, frankly. American people want those issues to change, but they were smart enough to say, we don't think these are the individuals that can actually bring the change that we're looking for. We think these individuals are just going to be a little too extreme, a little too partisan, and therefore they couldn't get on board with bringing some of these new faces on. And so I think that's where, when you look at all the polls, the one question they don't ask is, when they look at what issues are important to you, education, inflation, whatever it might be, but is partisanship important to you? And really that really kind of took the cake, if you will, for a lot of this. And it's something that I think a lot of folks underestimated and we missed. But the good lesson there is, we have to have candidates that can win. It doesn't matter what you do in a primary if you cannot close the deal in November. And so, hopefully the Republican Party as a whole will make sure that we're nominating winners. The folks that can really get there in November and drive forward on those policy changes that we want to see.
Are you thinking of running for president in 2024?
Not today. Not today.
Governor,
Look, I gotta
Governor, what about if not today? Broadly, are you thinking about it? You're clearly thinking about.
Oh, a lot of folks are talking about it, to be sure. Yeah, look, folks have come and offered, where they can raise money and do infrastructure, and it's very flattering conversations. I'm not ruling anything out by any means, but I really do have an obligation to New Hampshire first. And look, we're still a year plus away from the first.
But where's your gut, Governor? Where's your gut? You're an engineer.
My gut's in the 603. My gut is in the live free or die state right now, and I mean that quite sincerely. Look, 1.4 million people are counting on me to get the job done and deliver for them. Now, will I be traveling the country? Will I be talking to a lot of folks about how we do it here? Absolutely. I'm flattered when people want me to come kind of share our model and what Chris Sununu is about and what we can do. I'll absolutely be doing that. But there's no reason to jump into a presidential race right now when I think making sure that we get this model right here can be that example still that gets shared across the country. So it's not a binary yes or no or anything like that. It's not my wheelhouse right now, but we'll see what the future brings.
Is President Trump, the former president, vulnerable now? He just got criminal referrals from the House January 6th committee. He's being investigated by the Justice Department. Do you think his political capital could start to fade in 2023 inside your own party?
Well, it ain't going up. I mean, I'll tell you that. How does it get any better? I've said this before. I think he made his announcement at his most politically weak point, right? It was an announcement of defense, if you will. It hasn't gone great since then. I mean, there keeps problem after problem after problem. He keeps making his problems even worse. So I just don't see how this gets any better for the former president. Now, does that mean he can't win the nomination? No, of course, he could still win the nomination. It's 18 plus months away. We got a long ways to go until then. And I just don't see a path where it gets increasingly better. I think as more candidates get in, as more of the general American public, we forget you and I are kind of in the mix, right? We're inside baseball. But the average person right now just wants to make sure that, how are they going to put food on the table, deal with inflation, heat their homes over winter? These are the real issues folks are talking about. So I just think there's still a lot of time for folks to engage with the other options that are out there. So we'll see what happens. And I think the most importantly, whoever comes out of the Republican process has to be somebody that can truly win in November. That's all that matters, right? Otherwise, this is just a theoretical experiment, and we'll be, kicking the dirt, wondering why we were so silly, in December of 24. Let's win it in November of 24 and have a candidate that independents and even some of those conservative Democrats who don't like the ultra-progressive left-wing stuff, folks that they can get behind because they bring the right attitude, they bring the right optimism, they bring the right vision, not just policy. Policy is kind of the easy part, frankly, but they can bring the right vision and execute on that with a record.
You called Trump crazy once. Do you think he's fit for office? And is he fit politically to be the nominee, to answer what you just said?
Yeah, I don't think he could win in November of 24. So he could be the nominee, but I do not believe, and I think most people would agree, he's just not going to be able to close the deal in November of 24. So therefore, it doesn't really matter, right? We just have to find another candidate at this point.
Governor Chris Sununu of New Hampshire, thanks for stopping by for a conversation.
You bet. Thank you so much.
Tomorrow's January 6th committee report is expected to detail the ways in which political violence was looming ahead of January 6, 2021. We will speak to a professor who is tracking which threats still exist. That's next, and you're streaming Red and Blue.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely.
As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, there are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
States from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women. What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done? We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
In today's Money Watch, business analyst Jill Schlesinger is here to help.
How do you even begin to make the best use of your money? If you've got a match from your employer, don't give away that money.
Dollar Jill, y'all.
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa. Lawmakers have faced a rising number of violent threats since the January 6th Capitol attack. In fact, in 2021 alone, 9,600 threats were recorded by U.S. Capitol Police. That's about 1,000 more than the year before. For more on this, Robert Pape joins us now. He is a professor of political science at the University of Chicago. Professor, thanks for being here. Tough topic, serious topic. As we just discussed, the House January 6th committee has concluded what we expect will be its final public meeting. That happened yesterday. When you look at this committee, its work, its coming report, what have you concluded about what's responsible for the violence we saw on January 6th and we're seeing across the country in many ways still?
Well, first, just on the committee has made a historical contribution to our understanding of January 6th. And yes, there are sensational moments that the media, of course, will focus on, but the report itself, and yeah, I understand it's 150 pages, but the report itself is a historical contribution because it lays out the big picture. It does more than connect quotes. It explains with powerful evidence that President Trump, as president, led a scheme in violation of the U.S. Constitution to overturn the results of the election after the fact. January 6th, sending that mob into the Capitol to stop the certification was only a step in this scheme. Another part of the scheme was once the certification was stalled, to have new electors from states, because there were states with dual electors, certified, which would then change the Electoral College count and essentially overthrow the government of President Biden. That is a picture that we have not had before and that I think should be clearly laid out in front of the public, because this is insurrection, not with an army, but with politics and with the president using all of the tools at his disposal to actually change the Electoral College count after the fact. That is the big contribution by the January 6th committee.
And when you look at this committee and you look at also at your previous work, your discussions with CBS News, You have described, Professor, people who support violence for former President Trump and calling for his return to the White House as a group that is, in your view, the biggest threat to American democracy. If you believe that, if that's your assessment as an academic, then what is your assessment of former President Trump's third presidential bid, this 2024 campaign he launched just weeks ago, in terms of what it means for violence and online chatter?
We are only halfway through a dangerous zone for our democracy. And as former President Trump goes forward, you can see in his extremism, his agitation online, that he is stoking fires that have led to support for violence for millions and millions of Americans. In the midterms, we were fortunate that a large body, the body politic as a whole, essentially stood up to that extremism. President Biden, just a few days before the midterms, gave a powerful speech to put democracy on the ballot, so that this was essentially a referendum on democracy. However, as we go forward, there's going to be numerous flashpoints, Trump's prosecution, Trump's reelection bids, and we are unfortunately only halfway through this dangerous zone for our democracy. If we can go all the way through 2024, we will then have 2 full election cycles past January 6th, and I think then we could start to be confident. Between now and then, there are just too many millions of Americans who have been radicalized. And although we may not see violence happening on any particular day, we need to be aware that there's still a danger zone for our democracy.
Professor Robert Pape, you are on top of these critical issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that does it for our program today, but you can stream us, Red and Blue, Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes, you can watch them anytime on the CBS News website. Just click on cbsnews.com/red and blue.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
When folks on the right talk about socialism, it's a boogeyman.
Socialists are always going to promise you free tuition, free healthcare, free everything, but they will never promise you freedom.
I think of socialism as government control.
Wealth is too concentrated at the top right now.
Providing for people the things that they need is actually the world that we were supposed to live in.
Socialism didn't work in Cuba, North Korea, the Soviet Union.
Capitalism is the bedrock of the American dream.
My daughter's one of 40,000 people a year dying from lack of health care in this country. What kind of country am I living in that we're okay with this?
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
The Electoral College sets up a system where every vote is not equal.
The Electoral College serves a purpose and is valuable.
Electoral votes or the popular vote?
It would be more purely democratic if we got rid of the Electoral College. But sometimes simple democracy is not the best idea.
When people on both sides feel that the system is rigged, it divides us.
538 people elect the president. That violates our principles of democratic government.
The Electoral College made George Bush an illegitimate president from the beginning. It's a terrible disease on American democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now. We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
If
if it's important to our nation.
Madam Speaker, I want to talk to you, of course, about abortion.
It's on Face the Nation.
How much money is it that you think you need to go ask Congress for?
The why behind the biggest stories.
Can there be stability if Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
What are the words you would use to describe the Queen?
Kind, caring, and a nice lady.
I'm here for you. America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
You can see fire and rescue is up. They're doing wellness checks when people are trapped inside their homes.
We're going to be okay. We're going to make it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to CBS News. I'm Lilia Luciano. Aziza Schuler will be with me in a moment. Here's a look at some of the stories we're following right now. Congress is getting closer to reaching a long-term budget spending plan. Both Senate leaders expressed support for the $1.7 trillion plan and expect it to be passed by the latest budgetary deadline of Friday night. Plus, the Biden administration is weighing its response after the Supreme Court